Hello everyone, my name is Alisha. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing well. If you're looking to buy a house in Ireland, this video is all you need to watch. Many of you have been asking me about the house buying process. When you can buy a house, how much savings do you need to buy a house? What is help to buy scheme? What is first time buyer scheme? Loan to values, and so many questions like these. Well, I have got you covered in this video. Buying a house is the biggest financial commitment you will ever make. And I want to make sure that you have all the right information you need to know. That's why I have brought in an expert to break it all down for you. Our guest today has over 20 years of experience in the mortgage industry. He is one of the top mortgage advisor in the Irish market and has helped countless people navigate the home buying process. So whether it's getting approval for the best mortgage amount, securing lower interest rates, or raising finance for home improvements, he knows how to make the process stress-free and smooth. So without any further ado, let's welcome the man himself. Hi, John. How are you?
Hello, Alicia. That's some introduction. I have stopped counting at 20, by the way, because when I add more years, it just makes me feel older. So I just say to you, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and we leave it at that. So yeah, no, thank you so much for inviting me here today to have a conversation. I suppose what I'm aiming to do is, I suppose, answer any questions that you may have or people that follow you may have. Just, I suppose, I always say that buying a home is a journey, but it's about getting yourself ready and understanding where you're at. So whatever, I'm here to answer whatever questions you want to throw at me.
Thank you so much, John, for your precious time. And actually, I have a lot of questions, but I'll start with the most common question being asked about house buying. So I have a list of questions here. So
Okay.
we'll start with the most common question. So who all are eligible to buy a house in Ireland? And by eligibility, I mean in terms of employment, do they need to have a permanent contract with the employer, and about their visas, like do they have to be citizen or stamp for? So what is the eligibility criteria?
Brilliant. Well, there's about three questions in one there. Okay, I'll take them piece by piece. And I think for me, anyone coming from India, probably the most important question is, yeah, people say, well, I'm stamp one, I'm stamp 1G, I'm stamp four, I can't do it. So to kind of debunk that myth, right? Different banks have different rules about visa status. Okay, but to give you a sort of a definitive rule of thumb, if you're working in Ireland for 1 year, continuous employment, every single bank will lend you money. Okay. Some have
Great.
different rules. Some will do it after 6 months, but if you're working for 1 full year, every single bank will lend money to you. There are people that I talk to that are here only 3 months and they want to do it. There is one bank that will take them or will look after them, but I like to be able to give complete choice for everyone basically, and in effect, the 1 year is always my kind of preferred option when I'm talking to people. It helps them get ready and it gives them the best choice. To answer the next question around employment type, and this goes across the board, whether someone's from Europe or not, being a full-time employee is much easier to get a mortgage, because if you're self-employed, no matter where you're from, you need to have 2 years. You need to be self-employed for 2 years. Sometimes, if you're an IT professional, and they might take a different view, but in the main, it's 2 years you need to be self-employed for. If you're on a contract, then the banks take a different view to that as well, because a contract will come to an end. Okay, so if you happen to be in an employment whereby your contract, you're in onto your second contract, well, then you might get it and you might be okay. Now, I know you're heavily involved with the healthcare industry, and a lot of nurses, for example, would do agency work, right? Because they would get paid more. Then it boils down to basically length of time doing it, right? So if you were doing agency work and you were doing it for just 2-3 months, then the bank aren't going to take that level of income. But if you've been doing agency work for over a year and you can show a track record of it, then they will take that into account. So golden rule there is being full-time employment is the easiest way of making it happen. If you're self-employed, you need to 2 years. Contract work, you'd need to be into your second contract. And then kind of from an agency point of view, you'd need to have at least a year of it so that they would take that income into account.
You even answered the question which I didn't ask, and that's very good about agency nurses because I didn't thought of agency nurses, so agency nurses as well. So thanks for covering that.
I deal with a lot of nurses, and sometimes there are nurses who are doing agency work. And just to even expand on that a little bit, they may have a full-time job, but then their extra hours they do agency work. And I would always say to a nurse, saying, listen, don't do, for the purpose of the mortgage, don't do agency work, do overtime, because the bank will take that into account. It's a little nuance, but it's a very important nuance because they don't like two jobs, right? And they would view the agency work as a second job. But if you're actually working and you're doing your overtime in your job, well, then it's a better look. So the short term, you're thinking, well, if I do agency work, I can earn more money. Absolutely, and will help with the savings, but it reduces what the bank will lend to you. So there's a judgment call to be made there, you know.
Oh, that's something new to me. Yeah, that's a very good information. Okay.
Excellent.
So everybody, if you want to earn more income, it's better to do overtime with your own employer instead of doing agency because that will be counted as second employer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that sums it up perfectly.
Okay, so we'll move to our second most asked question. How can a buyer choose the right bank for them? You know, there are lots of bank offering mortgage. So which one is the right bank for me? How I'm gonna know that?
Well, I have a vested interest to say you should be talking to someone like me, like a broker. Isn't basically their role is to educate you as to which bank is giving the best deal, right? There's no one. I get asked this question a lot: which is the best bank? There's no one answer to that question, right? If you want more money, then one bank might be the best answer. If you want a long-term fixed rate on your mortgage, then another bank. You might want a short-term fixed rate, another bank. You might want cash back. So there's no real definitive answer to that one question. A lot of it boils down to being educated, getting an understanding of where you're at, getting an understanding as to your own personal preferences, and then talking to someone like, it doesn't have to be me, but talking to someone like that who will basically provide you that information and help you make an informed decision. Because you might have like today, bank A might be the best for your thoughts on it. You think, oh, interest rates are going to go up. But by the time you find a house, the world could have changed and you might have a different view. So the benefit of dealing with a broker is that his role here is to continue to educate someone so when they actually have to make the final decision on which bank they go with, they're dealing with the right information. Now, there's always a case of a crystal ball here because no one knows what's going to happen into the future. But at the same time, you need to make the best informed decision that you can with the information available at the right time.
Okay, and what about credit history? So if somebody is working here from last 1 year and if their credit history is not good.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. If you say the credit history isn't good, now that has a number of connotations. If you mean they've no credit rating in Ireland, that's not a problem. If they've taken a loan out in Ireland and they've missed payments, then they have a serious problem, okay? Because some banks will automatically say, no, you're looking to borrow money over whatever figure, a significant sum of money. And if you've taken loans in the past and you haven't honored them properly, right? Well, the banks don't view that properly. If you've just come into the country and if you haven't built up a credit rating, that doesn't cause a problem at all, okay? It's more a case of the banks don't look at credit rating per se as they do in other countries. They look at was there a problem or isn't there a problem? If there isn't a problem, no problem. If there was, they might say no for a period of time. With people that are coming into the country, they do look for credit rating reports from back home, right? There's a thing called an Experian credit report. So if you're sending money back to India or wherever, or if you're sending money, or if you basically have been in the country less than 5 years, some of the banks will look for what they call this Experian credit report. This is to basically show the bank here in Ireland that you have no other commitments back home that they would need to know about to basically factor into their decision, basically. Okay, so in summary, credit report only a problem if you've missed payments. Okay, otherwise it doesn't make any difference.
Okay, that's good to know. And one thing which just came into my mind. So, if somebody has less saving here, is it okay if they take some amount back from their own country? Like they can always ask some friends or parents from back home. So, is it a good idea if you're looking forward to buy a house in Ireland to get money from back home?
There's no problem with that. It does create questions. That's the only thing, right? So, but if there's money coming from back home, it certainly can't come from a friend. Okay. Any money that you're not allowed to borrow for, and I use that word because like, you're not allowed to borrow for a deposit. You can get a gift from family. Now, what often happens is family will give you a gift and then you will give it back to them. But once it's positioned as a gift with the bank, there is no issue. But it's really important that it's not coming from a friend because the friend isn't giving you a gift. The friend is lending you money. So it's how you position it with the bank. Some banks will want to see the money in the account at the point that you have agreed to buy the house. Other banks will be okay seeing the money in your account maybe a week or so before you get the keys to your house.
I think it's very important that you consult a mortgage broker before you take any steps about transferring money or getting money from back home. So, John, what is your role in that, or what's a mortgage broker role in
Brilliant.
sorting out these things?
Brilliant question. Well, to start with, I really believe my role is a role of education. My role, buying a house is a journey, right? It's not something that happens overnight. Obviously, one of the biggest decisions that people make might be to come and live in Ireland. The next one, the biggest decision then after would be, okay, we're going to stay here, or we want to buy a home. So what we tend to offer is what I call a mortgage roadmap. It shows you where you are and what you might need to do to get the home that you want. Okay, so before you, like in real terms, human beings are human beings, right? I want this house, I want that house, and your mind, your dreams can run away with you. Okay, so it's really important that you get an understanding of as to where you're at, and then you make a decision. You kind of go, okay, this is where we're at right now. Okay, what do we need to do to get what we want, or will we work with what we can do right now? And that's a personal choice. But I think it's so important that people. It doesn't have to be with me, by the way. I know I'm not the only person who can give this advice, but what it's really important is that you understand where you would be with the banks. What will the banks give you in terms of finance? What are the schemes that are out there? And I'm sure you're going to ask me about the government schemes. So where do all these pieces fit in? Armed with that information, you have a much better chance of being able to find a home. Like it's really difficult to find a home, but you need to help yourself by educating yourself as to where you're standing. That's we offer a kind of a mortgage roadmap to help in that process.
And I was the same when I was looking to buy a house in Ireland. My first question was which bank would be best for me? And I think that's where you need to contact a mortgage broker because he look at your profile and he chooses the best bank for you. So John, what are the criterias and how do you choose the best bank for an individual and which bank would give them better interest rate? So how do you decide that?
First thing is, it's all down to the banks will lend money based on your salary. That's the first thing that the banks will look at. So depending on how much money you're earning, okay? Now, in terms of so you've got to kind of look at it this way. Okay, bank A might lend you more money, but their interest rates could be higher. Bank B mightn't lend you as much, but they've got better interest rates. So then armed with that information, you go and find a home. Okay, when you found a home, you then make okay. Well, now that I know this is what I need, which is the best bank available for me at this point? I want to add a little bit to that as well, by the way, because you might buy, Alicia, and a lot of people are buying new properties. Okay. So a new property, you could agree to buy a new property today. It could take 6, 9, 12 months for the house to be built. Well, just because we pick bank A today does not mean that that's the right choice, because in 12 months' time, it's the rates that are available when you're actually going to close on the purchase, not the rate that you pick today. Okay. So what we would always do with our clients is basically we'd make a choice today, but with basically the view that we're going to relook at this probably 6 to 8 weeks out from the date you intend to close the deal, so that you're not making a decision that you can't change, because the interest rate cycle can change. And last year, the rates were going up, right up, but now they're going to come. They're in theory coming down, right? And they have started to come down. So in a year's time, you might think to make a choice today to take a variable rate because you think the rates are going to fall. But by the time your house is ready, they may have already come down. You might, okay, now we would take a fixed rate. So a conversation with someone like ourselves is the right way to do this, especially when you're buying a new property. Because, well, if you go direct to a bank and they're not going to tell you, oh, by the way, the other bank are offering a better deal today, but we will. Okay.
Well, that's very interesting, and that's actually true. Very good information. Now, talking about some government schemes, people usually get confused about the government schemes. So, first, we'll talk about First Home Scheme. What is First Home Scheme and who all are eligible for this?
Okay, the first home scheme is basically a scheme that's eligible to everyone, okay? But it's only eligible on new properties. Okay, that's the first thing, except, and there's one exception to this, except that you're buying the house that you're currently living in. So if your landlord basically wants to put the house on the market, you could potentially use the first home scheme in that. But 99 times out of 100, it's going to be for new properties only. Okay. There's a couple of elements to it. The first element is basically a ceiling on the price. So depending on where you're buying, okay, there is a ceiling as to which above you cannot use this scheme. In Dublin, for houses, it's 475. For an apartment, a new apartment, it's 500. Outside of Dublin, it can be 425. So you need, depending on where you're looking to buy, you need to check the actual location and basically look at the amounts that you can use. That's the kind of the overall basis of it. The second part of it, it only will cover the difference between what the bank will lend and the shortfall. Okay, so if the bank will only lend you 350,000, you have to take all the money the bank will lend you and use the difference for the first home scheme. Okay, it's not, you can't just use all the first home scheme. It's the idea behind it is to help people buy a home where the banks aren't lending them enough money. Okay, then there's two elements to it as well. It's equity. Okay, so they will own. And there's two options. If you're using the Help to Buy scheme, the maximum you can use is 20%. If you're not using the Help to Buy scheme, it's 30%. They actually own 30%. You don't start paying it back for 5 years, okay? But if the value of your property has gone up, the amount you owe them is going to go up accordingly, because you're not buying 100% of the property. You're buying 70 or 80%, depending on how much you use in the first home scheme. So it's a really good scheme. The challenge is basically finding the properties. Again, is the biggest challenge with this. But for people that only qualify for, say, 340 and they want to buy in Dublin, well, the first home scheme is the solution to them, in my opinion. So it's good. And it's not for second-hand properties unless the house you're living in is going to be sold.
And First Home Scheme is only for the first time buyer. So that means they should not own a home back home as well, or it only applies for first home buyer in Ireland.
To my knowledge, and I don't know what level of checking they do, but the bank will check that. In the first home scheme really is for first time buyers in Ireland and back home. So if they own a home back home, if the bank were to know better, they wouldn't qualify for the first home scheme.
Okay, that's good to know. And what is Help to Buy and who all are eligible for Help to Buy?
Again, Help to Buy is basically it's based on, for new properties only, there's no exceptions to that. It's based on 10% of the cost price, subject to a maximum of 30,000. Okay. And it's based on the tax that you paid in the previous 4 years. Okay. So we're now in 25. So it's the tax you paid in 24, 23, 22, and 21. It's really important if you're buying a new property that you understand how much you qualify for. Okay. Now, if you're only relatively new in the country, okay, you may not qualify for the full amount. Okay. I would have a strategy for people on that. So say you're looking to buy a house now and you've only really paid tax last year and you don't qualify for the full amount. If you buy a house now, but the house isn't going to be ready till next year, you can then basically claim the tax but that you end up paying in this year. But the house could not close this year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's the Help to Buy. It's it doesn't unlike the first home scheme, it's complete. It's just a refund of the tax that you paid. You're not giving up any equity. Like there's great value in it. I am of the belief that it's in the price, right? So if you're looking at second hand and first hand, don't feel you have to buy new because of the Help to Buy, because I think that's in the price. But if you don't have the savings and you want the ease of buying a new property, the Help to Buy scheme is brilliant.
Then I think Help to Buy is better than first time buyer scheme.
Yes, I would agree. I would absolutely agree with you on that. Really important point, basically, on the Help to Buy in conjunction with the first home scheme, right? You need to be borrowing 70% of the cost price. If you're not borrowing 70% of the cost price, you can't get the Help to Buy scheme. Okay. So if you're trying to use both schemes, it's really, really important that you qualify for basically 70% of the cost price. So if you're looking at 475 you'd need the banks to be happy to give you 332,000, I believe. That means you could then use both schemes. So that's if you're trying to use both, it's really important to keep that in mind.
So any buyer who wants to use both schemes, they need to have 70% of the amount from the bank.
Yeah, the bank needs to basically be happy to lend them 70% of the cost price. And that goes, if you're just using the Help to Buy scheme, that's one of the rules of the Help to Buy. You need to be borrowing 70% of the cost price.
Thanks very much for that. That's very, very informative. And other thing is loan to value. So what is exactly loan to value and who can take loan to value and how does it different from the other schemes?
Well, loan to value isn't a scheme, by the way, so that might be a misconception that's out there. The loan to value, what I just said, you need to be borrowing 70%. The loan to value means the amount of the mortgage as a percentage of the cost price. So that loan to value that you're talking about is exactly the point I was making a second ago. You need to be borrowing 70% of the loan to 70% of the cost price. Okay. Just to kind of the lower the loan to value that you are using. So say, for example, you only wanted to borrow 50% of the cost price, and that doesn't happen very often. The benefit of a lower loan to value is better interest rates. So it's not a scheme as such. It's basically when you're borrowing less of the value, you can get better rates. It's the bank will give you better rates the lower the loan to value. So normally first time buyers tend to be borrowing the full 90%. But if it comes lower than 80%, the bank will give them a better rate. If it's lower than 60%, you'll get a better rate. So the loan to value just determines what's the best rates you can get available.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. So next question is my favorite, and I think most of us want to know, how does home ownership work in Ireland?
Well, it's a very broad concept or broad question, but basically you don't ever fully own the home until your mortgage is paid off. That's in truth, but it is your home. Okay, so when you find a home and you agree to buy it and you're getting a mortgage to buy it, when you get the keys to your house, as long as you continue to pay the mortgage, right? The deeds are in your name, but the bank have security of them, okay? Because the bank have the deeds as security against the mortgage. So really, you only fully own the home when your mortgage is cleared, okay? So that's but in real terms, it's your home. You just owe the bank money on it, and then but when the mortgage is finished, then you own it completely.
So once we finish our loan, so we own the house, and I mean, can we pass it on to our children?
If at the point whereby um, you were leaving an inheritance, it would be based on you can leave it to your children. Obviously, there's inheritance rules as well, okay? But you are allowed to give family a certain level of money without any tax being paid. So yes, it can be passed to the next generation um, at a future point. It's when you own the home, it's yours. Okay, so when the mortgage is paid off, it's 100% yours. It's yours to do with what you will, whether you want to sell it, whether you whatever you want to do with it. If you were to sell it and you wanted to go back to India, or whatever your thoughts would be, or if you wanted to give it to family, well, that you'd write that into a will, and then I don't want to be morbid, but when you pass, it would basically go to the whoever you've written in your will that you want your property to go to. Okay.
Okay, thanks so much for clearing that, because I think there was some misconception about ownership of house, because most of the people, they think that even if they pay the whole mortgage, if the whole mortgage is being paid and the mortgage account is closed, still they don't own the house 100%. I mean, people think that they can't give it to their inheritance, but yes, there could be some inheritance rule, you said. So
There's definitely, I don't want to pretend I'm a tax expert, and it would all depend on where the inheritance taxes were at the point in the future. But I know as things stand that you can give a family member over 400,000 without any tax being paid. Okay, so that would come in the form of a house if necessary. But if you'd already given your family money, well then it would reduce it. But there's absolutely no issues with it at any point. You own the home once the mortgage is paid.
okay, very good. That's good to know. So next thing is, buying a house itself is very expensive and it takes a lot of savings and things like that. But what other than that, what are the hidden costs? So aside from the house price, what are the major costs involved?
Brilliant. And I would always put this together in the roadmap that I would do for people, right? But the first cost is a government cost. There's stamp duty, which is always 1% of the cost price. Okay, so if you're buying a house for 400,000, you'll have 4,000 to pay. The next thing you'd have is lawyer or solicitor fees. I tell people to budget between 2,500 and 3,500 in totality there. Okay. The reason being the solicitor might have a fee of about 1,700, but then there's VAT and then there's registration fees. So you need to factor them into account. You'll then, if you're buying a new property, you'll have to pay for valuations. So that could cost anywhere between €150 and €300. And then you'll have insurance costs. Like the bank require life insurance and property insurance. If you're buying a second-hand property, I always advise people that you should always do a survey of the property to make sure there's nothing structurally not great about the property that you're buying. Because, like, well, I'm no expert on properties. I wouldn't know if there was something structurally wrong. So it's really important if you're buying a set that you get something checked so that you're not suddenly buying a house that comes with a lot of pain because you didn't do a survey and you don't know what needs to be fixed, basically.
That's a very good answer. And I think I forgot to ask, how much saving an individual need before they even plan to buy a house?
But it depends if they're looking at new house or second-hand house, okay? And if they're looking for new, they need to find out immediately what they might qualify for with the Help to Buy scheme, okay? But in theory, the bank will only lend 90% of the cost price, but you still have to qualify for that based on your income. But in theory, you need to bring 10% to the deal, and you'd need probably another 7 or 8 thousand to cover legal fees and stamp duty. So hypothetically, you're buying a property for 150,000, right? You would need to be bringing about 52,000 to the deal. Okay, 10% of 450 is 45. Add another 7 or 8 is basically 8, 52, 53. If you qualified for the full amount for the help to buy of 30, it would mean you're going to need to have about 23,000 of your own money. Now, you don't need to have it available when you're applying, but you need to know it was available by the time you're coming to close the deal. So if you don't have the savings yourself, you can get a gift from family member as well. Okay, so that can make up the difference. So I know you've asked me a specific question, and I haven't really been able to give you a specific answer, but I've kind of framed it in terms of, well, what you would need to do. If you're buying a second-hand property, it's certainly going to be more money you need. But you just need to know you need to know how much you need, and then you need to know you can have it by the time the house is ready. Okay?
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. So if somebody is working here full time, but they have a plan to return back home after 10 or 12 years, would you suggest them to buy a house in Ireland, or would it be better or smarter for them to rent instead for 10 or 12 years?
Wow, that's a great question. And I'll tell you why what I always say to people when they're looking to buy a home. I always tell people buying a home isn't an investment, it's a lifestyle choice. You're buying it for, is it near your family? Is it near your job? Is it near good schools? Is it near your hobbies, right? And I personally bought 2 properties in Ireland at the worst time, 2008 and 2009, okay? And within 6 months of buying the property, the market crashed. Okay. Now I was really lucky, and it was luck. It wasn't any great planning on my behalf that I didn't have to sell. And if I did, I would have had a serious problem. So if I was going to buy a house right now, and with kind of, I say to people, you need to take a long-term view on this. So you need to be taking it as a 10 to 15-year view. Okay. Now, then I'd be saying it's okay to buy, right? If you're taking a shorter term time frame, so say for example, they're going to go home within the next 5 years, okay? Then there's a greater risk, okay? Because if they buy a house today, they're at the mercy of where the market is in 5 years' time. Unless they buy a home that they know they'll be able to rent out, even if they were to leave the country, okay? So my view on it, again, I asked this question to people. I told them, how long do you plan to stay in Ireland? And they said, oh, we're here forever. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And if they're saying, like you just asked the question, well, we might go back home in 5 or 10 years. If it's a 5 year period, I'd be kind of more cautious, because you're then, what I would say, if you're buying in 5 years, you're not really buying it as a home. You're buying it as an investment, okay? Because you're going to be leaving. So then you're then the risk of where the market will be if you need to sell the property to go home. And the shorter the time frame, you're at the risk of the market going against you. But if you take a longer term view, property will go up. So I would say to someone, if you tend to go home within 10 years, buy, but make sure you buy somewhere where you feel confident that you'd be able to rent it out if you didn't want to sell at the point you're going home. Okay? That would be how I would answer that question. Because, as I said, it's not an investment for most people. But if your choice is that you're going to be leaving, then you need to have a little bit of an investment mind about buying. And that's why I would always put in if I'm buying near a hospital, if I'm buying near a university, if I'm buying near a city centre, these are all places that you should always be able to rent out if it meant that you were going home and if the market conditions weren't correct at the time for you to sell.
I strongly agree, and I think you answered it in a very nice way that buying a house, people often think it's an investment, but no,
Yeah,
it's a lifestyle. And you
absolutely.
deserve to treat yourself.
No, yeah, and you asked this question earlier on about the inheritance. It's an investment probably for your future children, okay? Because they'll inherit. But for you, you're living out your life. It's your journey right here, right now. So it needs to tick lifestyle choice boxes more so than, is this the best time to buy? And then if in the back of your mind as you're planning to go home, you need to just adjust your thinking slightly to cater for that and in helping you make the right choice.
I think you already answered my next question, but what do you think, according to your years of experience, is buying a house in Ireland is a good long-term investment?
Well, yeah, obviously it's the industry I'm in, so I have a vested interest in people buying homes. But I do a bit like yourself, and I have a duty of care to give good information to help people make the right choice, and I take that very seriously. So if you told me, as I said, we just discussed, if you were going to go home in the next 3 or 4 years, I'd be cautious about buying. Okay. But if you're taking a longer term view on this, absolutely buying a home makes perfect sense. You'll never know the perfect moment because nobody has a crystal ball. But if it ticks the boxes, is it near your job? Is it near schools? Is it near your friends, family, your hobbies? Then it makes perfect sense for me.
And what do you think? Is it the right time to buy a house in Ireland, or do you think if somebody is looking forward to buy a house, they should wait for at least 1 or 2 years more?
In theory, now you put me on the spot here. That's like an economic forecast, right? But here's my own view on this: the supply and demand is what's causing the prices to go up. At the beginning of COVID, the experts were saying, "Oh, the prices were going to fall." I said they wouldn't. No, I didn't think they'd go up, but they didn't. They went up. When the interest rates went up, the prices still didn't fall. Okay. Now, the only thing, the demand and supply are still out of kilter. So I don't see prices falling because interest rates are coming down. Okay. Now, the only caveat to that is Donald Trump. Okay. And I don't want to bring politics into this conversation, but if there happened to be a trade war, world kind of war, and the price were to start going back up, then the interest rates might go up, maybe confidence would come out of the market, or maybe demand would fall. But I don't see that happening in the next 2 years. Okay. I think that because the gap between supply and demand is so great. After the 2 year period, it's very difficult to make an absolute view on it. But if I'm saying I want to buy a home and I see myself living in this home for 10 more years, then I'm saying there's no reason not to buy now. Because if your house is worth 50,000 more next year or 50,000 less next year, it doesn't make any difference if you're not going anywhere. You might feel better if it's worth more money, but that's all it is. You're living there. It's irrelevant. Okay. So to buy, I wouldn't say wait 2 years to buy if you're taking a long term view. If you've got a short term view, well then I'd be more circumspect about buying because you just don't know where the world is going to be. And by taking a short term view, you bring more risk into the process.
I think the more you wait, the more the prices will go up and you never be able to buy the house. That's what I think.
Well, yeah, there is that, but like I've been doing this for a long time, so I know, Alicia, that there was a period where everyone was buying, and then suddenly the market crashed, right back in 2008, 2009. Okay, so you just don't ever know what's around the corner. At the moment, it feels like the prices won't fall, and the gap between supply and demand would suggest that. But it's very difficult to say that with huge confidence over even a 2 year period, even a 12-month period, because nobody knows what's around the corner in the world.
Okay, yeah, well said. Yeah, fair enough. Now I can see you have literally so much of knowledge. Now I want to know some secrets. Okay, so what are the mistakes, according to your experience, buyer usually makes, especially as an immigrant, when they are looking forward to buy property in Ireland?
Biggest mistake they make, and I don't even think it's a mistake, but a lot of immigrants will be sending money back home. Okay, that causes two issues. One, sometimes some of the banks view that as almost like a commitment. They almost view it as in this is something that has to be sent home. It's like a loan. Okay. Now I don't agree with the bank's view on that. I think it's fundamentally wrong. Okay, but it's not an argument I would win. So what I would say to people, and I have no problem giving this advice, I would say to people, if you want to send money back home, be clever about it. Make sure it's not seen visible on your bank accounts. Take the money out in cash, give it to your friend, and get your friend to send the money back to your family. So then, in that way, there's no absolute record of you sending money back home, right? Because you've given it's gone a different way. Now that's probably don't know if that's bad advice or good advice. I think it's good advice because I don't like the banks. Because, in my opinion, and I firmly believe this, you should be allowed to do with your money what you will. If you want to help your family back home, well, who are the banks to say you can't do this? Do you understand? But this is the view
Yeah.
some of them take. So, but I'm not going to win that row with the bank, but I can give advice how to make it happen in a different way so it doesn't have an impact with regard to getting a mortgage here. And that for me is the fundamental biggest mistake. The second mistake is not really understanding your income. There's lots of rules out there. You hear, oh, I can get 4 times my salary. Okay. Now, say for example, someone as a nurse or a doctor, and they say, well, I'm earning X, but their salary is made up of basic overtime and shift work. Okay. The banks view those all in different ways. Okay. So having a misunderstanding as to what the banks will lend to you without talking to someone like a broker or without actually having a proper conversation with someone, they make quick decisions. They think they know what they're doing, but they're working off misinformation and they're miseducating themselves in terms of what they do. So for me, the most important thing for anyone trying to buy a home is getting a real and proper understanding as to where they're at and to send home money in a clever way. Maybe the two. I have other tips, but I don't want to give away everything just yet. Anyone that wants can come talk to me directly. There's some other stuff that I probably would tell people on a one-to-one basis that I wouldn't probably say over a public forum.
Yeah. So definitely that's a very good suggestion, John, I would say. And guys, that was John. And John, thank you so much for all the precious information and your time. And it's great chatting to you. And if you're looking forward to buy a house in Ireland, you should definitely contact John. I'll drop the link of 1:1 consultation in the description of this video. And John, it's free, isn't it?
It is
1:1
absolutely free.
consultation.
Yeah, we basically what we do is we have a link. We do a mortgage roadmap. We would send the link out. People would fill in the information. We send what I mentioned earlier on, this roadmap, a free roadmap, and then we would have a one-to-one consultation where I'll answer all the questions that we may have. And as I said, it's a journey. So having that conversation fast tracks the time in terms of getting ready. And that's the most important piece. As I said, my role here is to educate. And I firmly believe if I do a good enough job of that, then people will be happy for me to represent them when the time is right. Okay.
So that's great. Definitely, you should book 1:1 consultation with John before you move ahead to buy a house. Whether it's a new house, it's an old house, whatever it is, John can guide you best because he's definitely best in the business. If you have watched this video this far, you know John is best in the business.
There's a
Yes,
lot of
John.
good brokers out there. I wouldn't want to say I'm the best, but I'm very passionate about it, and I like you. I have a duty of care to give good information, and I'll let other people decide who's the best in the business. So,
You're one of the best. We'll take
but
it
that's
that
okay.
way.
I'll take that. I'll take that. So, thank you so much.
And I'll also give John's YouTube and Instagram links in the description of this video. So make sure you follow John on YouTube and Instagram for more detailed video about how to buy a house and what are the things you need to remember while looking forward to buy a house. Thank you so much, John, for your time.
You're very welcome. Lovely to talk to you. Thanks, Alisha.
Same here, John, and all the best to everyone who is looking forward to buy a property in Ireland.
Bye.